I denied you 3 times. How can I now look you in the eyes?
Preach all that I have commanded you. I am with you until the end of time. Death held me for a moment, but love set me free forever.
He is risen, just as he said.
I saw him. They didn't believe me, but I know it was him. His resurrection was the beginning.
I denied you 3 times. How can I now look you in the eyes?
It is better to die for the truth than to live in fear.
Preach all that I have commanded you. I am with you until the end of time.
Go into all the world, preach the gospel to all nations. You will be my witnesses in Jerusalem. I know that I will be with you, always.
Risking my life to earn my citizenship and now forced to take idle servants' work, while Nero makes a mockery of everything wrong.
But still a threat, Prefect. While alive, that deceiver said he would rise again after 3 days.
Everything Rome stands for.
You taught us love. But how do we love those who seek to destroy us?
They told him it would ruin his life. They warned him that stepping into the sandals of Christ was a path with no return. And still, he said yes. Jim Caviezel, a name that once flickered brightly among Hollywood's rising stars, made a decision that would burn bridges, ignite debates, and ultimately reshape history. Before becoming the face of one of the most powerful biblical portrayals ever captured on screen, Caviezel wasn't even sure if he'd ever act. His path was meant for something entirely different. In another life, he was training to be a soldier. The U.S. Marines were calling his name, and he had the strength and discipline to answer. Or perhaps it would have been the basketball court. He was good, fast, tall, and hungry. But destiny doesn't always scream. Sometimes it whispers through pain. Sometimes it whispers through pain. A broken leg, one fracture that shattered not just bone, but dreams. And in the silence that followed, Caviezel heard something else, a calling. He was only 19 when it happened. He says he felt a presence. Not just a moment of clarity, but a divine encounter. I felt a love I had never known before, he confessed years later. I felt a peace that had no origin in this world, and I heard something deep inside. If you become an actor, you won't know where to go. Let me guide you. That moment became his compass. He wasn't chasing fame. He was following a voice. Fast forward to Los Angeles. He had no contracts, no guarantees, no safety net. But Caviezel had a conviction most actors only pretend to channel. People laughed behind his back, called him delusional, told him to quit. But in his heart he knew the story he was meant to tell hadn't yet been written.
Truth. What is truth?
I am. My kingdom is not of this world. I was born, came into this world to testify to the truth. Everyone on the side of the truth listens to me.
He understood our weakness. He loved us for it.
You think he's coming back? I know he is.
His cross, where they nailed him to it, and raised him up for all to see.
Hollywood took notice. He landed solid roles. Frequency, 2000, showcased his raw intensity. And The Count of Monte Cristo, 2002, gave him dramatic gravitas. He was climbing. Some insiders even whispered that he could be the next Superman. But life had other plans. That's when Mel Gibson entered the picture. Gibson, himself a lightning rod for controversy, was quietly casting for a passion project unlike anything the world had ever seen. A film about the final hours of Jesus Christ, told not as a sanitized Sunday sermon, but as a raw, brutal, unflinching vision of love, sacrifice, and blood. And he had a rule. Jesus had to be 33 years old. His initials had to be JC sound familiar. When Gibson found Caviezel, it wasn't a casting. It was a reckoning. But he didn't sugarcoat it. If you take this role, Gibson warned him, your career in Hollywood will never be the same. Doors will close. People will turn away. You may never work again. Pause. Imagine that moment. Imagine holding a script in your hands that could ignite the faith of millions or destroy everything you've built. Caviezel didn't flinch. We all have our crosses to bear, he replied. If I don't carry mine, I'll be crushed by it. And so it began. No studio backing, no Hollywood fanfare. Just two men and a vision so daring, so unapologetically bold, that many believed it would never survive the system. They were wrong. The Passion of the Christ, 2004, was a cinematic earthquake, made for just $30 million and exploded past $600 million at the global box office. It spoke in Aramaic, Latin, and Hebrew, languages no mainstream audience understood. Yet its message transcended every barrier. People wept. People knelt. Some turned away in horror. Others saw their faith renewed, and behind that impact was Caviezel, bleeding, trembling, and embodying the weight of divine sacrifice. But the price was steep. After the premiere, the calls stopped. The doors that had once opened so eagerly. Jim Caviezel, the actor once poised for blockbusters, had become radioactive in the eyes of a nervous industry. But something else was happening. Something deeper. Caviezel, no longer driven by red carpets or golden statues, found peace in rejection. He had stepped into a role larger than himself, and it had changed him forever. And now, nearly 2 decades later, he's ready to return, because there's a part of the story the world has never truly seen. Not the blood, not the nails, not the screams, but what came after, the silence, the descent, the light that pierced the pit of death itself. This is the resurrection. And what lies ahead, dear viewer, is not just a sequel. It's a revelation.
In the stillness, he knelt, not as a king, but as a son. The dust clung to his robe, the stars watched in silence, and the olive branches whispered secrets only heaven could hear. He did not ask for power, he did not beg for escape, he only said,
"Let it be your will."
And in that quiet surrender, the weight of the world rested on trembling hands.
Father, I am tired, but I will not turn away. Not from them, not from this. They do not understand, but I still love them. Even the ones who strike, even the ones who leave. If this cup cannot pass from me, then let it be. My will rise above my fear. I will carry it, all of it, for them.
He healed the broken. He fed the hungry. He walked among us. The carpenter who was more than a man. But the crowd turned, and the crown they gave him was made of thorns.
My God, why have you forsaken me? I return to you, not with fear, but with love, with wounds, and with all I was sent to carry.
They buried him, and with him, every hope they held. is not so easily buried. 3 days of silence. 3 days where the world stood still. The grave broke open, and he walked out alive. He is not here. He is risen.
But what does resurrection truly mean? What really happened during those 3 days? Between the moment the tomb was sealed and the earth trembled in front of it. We know the story as it's often told. Jesus died, he rose, he appeared, he ascended. But this is not just about what happened on earth. This is about what happened beneath it. Because resurrection isn't just a return to life. It's a conquest over death. And death is a kingdom. It is in this terrifying, rarely explored terrain where Mel Gibson's vision dares to begin. Not with a sunrise, not with an empty tomb, but with a descent into darkness. In a recent interview, Gibson stated, "To tell this story properly, we must go to the beginning of the war. We must go to the fall of the angels. We must go to hell. Yes, you read that right. This film does not begin with the stone rolling away. It begins with eternity shattering. Picture it. The heavens ablaze, the rebellion of Lucifer, an army of angels twisted into demons, the collapse of light into shadow. This isn't fantasy. This is the forgotten first chapter of the resurrection. According to the letter to the Ephesians, he descended into the lower parts of the earth, Ephesians 4:9. And in the words of the Creed, repeated by millions for centuries, he descended into hell. But what does that actually mean? You see, before Christ, even the righteous could not enter heaven. Paradise was closed, locked, sealed by the weight of original sin. And so the souls of the just, Moses, David, Abraham, Ruth, Isaiah, all waited. In a realm neither heaven nor damnation. A place of shadows. The bosom of Abraham. They waited for one thing, redemption. Now imagine, after the last breath on the cross, after the spear pierced his side, the Son of God did not rest. He descended, not to be tormented, but to conquer, not to plead, but to proclaim, "It is finished." In Gibson's vision, this is where the film begins, not as a poetic metaphor, but as a spiritual war, a world engulfed in ancient fire, fallen angels recoiling in terror, and at the center, a radiant figure moving through the gloom, wounds still fresh, eyes blazing with divine authority. Jesus Christ, alive in death. This imagery is not simply for spectacle. It's theological. It's foundational. It's what countless church fathers taught for centuries, that Christ, after dying, went to free the captives, to break open the gates of Sheol, to offer his hand to those who had waited in hope, and to say, "Come, your time of waiting is over." And in this unfolding vision, Mel Gibson doesn't stop with the resurrection. He expands the scope from the fall of Lucifer to the descent into death, to the appearances after rising, to the disbelief of Thomas, the burning hearts on the road to Emmaus, the net-breaking miracle. On the Sea of Tiberias, the ascension into the clouds, and Pentecost when fire itself became language. But perhaps most astonishing, the martyrs. Gibson has declared, no one dies for a lie, and he intends to prove it. Because every single disciple, except one, died a brutal death. Why? Because they saw something no man could deny. They saw the resurrected Christ, and that encounter rewrote the very laws of fear. Peter, crucified upside down by his own request. Andrew, tied to an X-shaped cross for days, still preaching with his final breaths. James the Greater, beheaded in Jerusalem. the first apostolic martyr. Thomas, pierced by a lance in India, bringing the gospel to the edges of the known world. Bartholomew, flayed alive. Paul, beheaded in Rome after years in chains. They didn't die for philosophy. They didn't die for metaphor. They died because they touched the impossible. And Gibson wants us to feel what they saw. He's not alone in this vision. Alongside him, once again, is Jim Caviezel. 2 decades older, wiser, more scarred, and more ready than ever. Caviezel has spoken about the burden and the privilege of becoming Christ on screen. During the filming of the first movie, he suffered intense injuries. A dislocated shoulder, a 2-foot gash on his back, hypothermia from hanging in the cold for hours, and, most shocking of all, a literal lightning strike. He survived. He continued. He called the experience not just a role, but a conversion. And he's coming back, this time with new tools, advanced visual effects, a deeper theological foundation, and an audience that has waited 20 years for what comes next. But the deeper question is not how they will show it. It's why. Why return to this story now? Why descend into fire and shadow once more? Because the resurrection is not an ending, ends the ignition of everything. The disciples didn't emerge from that upper room with quiet gratitude. They stormed the world with holy defiance, and the church was born in flame, not comfort. This is the story Gibson wants to tell. The missing bridge between crucifixion and coronation. The war beneath the silence. And if the beginning of this film takes us to hell, then the next chapter will show us what heaven really looks like when it touches earth.
The faith-based film world has changed a lot since 2004. Back then, The Passion of the Christ shocked theaters and stunned Hollywood. But now, audiences are looking for something different. Shows like The Chosen and movies like Jesus Revolution have become favorites. They feel softer, warmer. They focus more on relationships, emotions, and quiet moments of faith. Instead of big battles or dramatic bloodshed, they offer gentle storytelling. And that's what many viewers seem to want right now. So will Mel Gibson's rough and intense style still work in 2025? Christian moviegoers today are younger. They've grown up with social media, YouTube, and streaming apps. They like deep dialogue, modern pacing, and relatable characters. And many churches that once bought entire theaters for The Passion aren't doing that anymore. Things have changed.
21 years later, what took so long? And the big thing that Mel Gibson is saying is that it took him 8 years to even write this script, that he has spent a ton of time. It's not just this simple project that's going to pick up where the last one left off. There's a lot to consider in this. And so the biggest news that he seemed to confirm this week is that this very likely will be 2 movies. So you're talking about a trio of films total, not just one movie, that he's not really able to get it all into one more film. So that is a pretty big undertaking, honestly.
Mm-hmm. Now Mel faces a stiff choice. Stick with his bold, dramatic vision or try to adapt. Because this new film is stepping into a very different world. A world that's already filled with Christian content. And the big question is, will it stand out or feel like it belongs to another time? Mel isn't just fighting to release a film. He's fighting to matter in a space that has quietly moved forward without him. Or has it?
Misty, 20 years later.
Oh yeah, 20.
You are now turning to the resurrection.
That's it. Yeah, the resurrection now.
Where are we? Where are you?
It's kind of pre-production stage now, and we're definitely on it. It is my focus, and it will happen. It's like childbirth. It's like it's been 20 years, and it's like it was an idea I had to do the next part a long time ago, but it's been a very long labor.
Why do you think it's taken all this time?
Because it's supposed to.
This film isn't just another movie. It's Mel Gibson's biggest gamble. With a budget over $75 million, a complicated cast, new technology, and heavy spiritual themes, this might be the most ambitious Christian movie ever attempted. And yet, it carries more than money. It carries pressure, hope, controversy, and maybe even redemption. Some fans believe Mel's vision still has power. Others say his time is over. But one thing's clear: if resurrection fails, it might shut the door for films this bold ever again. Studios are watching, critics are waiting, and believers are hoping. So now, all eyes are on this final chapter. Not just of Jesus' story, but of Gibson's legacy. Will it rise? Or will it fall? Are we about to witness a cinematic resurrection, or the quiet burial of a faith film legend? Kindly share your thoughts and opinions in the comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more. And it's called Resurrection. This time, he's not just showing suffering. He wants to show the power and mystery of rise. But here's the hard part. How do you top something that already changed the world once? Can lightning really strike twice? Or is Mel taking a risk that could break the legacy he worked so hard to build? Before we look at cameras, actors, or budgets, we have to ask the bigger question. Can a film about resurrection shake people the way the crucifixion did? And what if it doesn't? That's where the story truly begins.
When Hacksaw Ridge came out and Bloodfather the same year, oh, that's a good film too. When they came out, you started doing interviews, started doing press interviews, and then you said, you know, we're going to be bringing out The Resurrection, right? Yep. Now, that was 2016. Is it coming soon?
Yeah, sooner now, because what I had to, it is such a massive undertaking that you can't do it lightly and you can't do it quickly. You have to really consider what it is that you need to show in order to be poignant. It can't be linear. You have to have many things to juxtapose against one another, even from different time periods, in order to illustrate what something means in a more full way. And I think it's going to be a real jigsaw puzzle to do. And I have two scripts.
Right.
And one of them is very structured and a very strong script and kind of more what you'd expect. And the other is like an acid trip. And because you're going into other realms and stuff.
Okay.
I mean, you're in hell. You're in, you know, it's like, you know, you're watching the angels fall.
Oh, wow.
It's like crazy. You know,
is Jim going to come back as Jesus?
Yeah, of course. Nobody else.
He's 17 years older. How does that work?
I don't know. It's going to be a Rip Van Winkle kind of thing, you know. 3 days later, look, he's got wrinkles. You can fix that stuff now.
Yeah.
Mel Gibson's new movie isn't just a sequel. It's a huge swing. Titled Resurrection of the Christ, it's planned for release later in 2025. But this time, Mel's not just filming a crucifixion. He's telling the story of what happened after the tomb was sealed. That means showing the resurrection itself, one of the most mysterious and sacred moments in all of Christianity. But here's where things get tricky. This isn't just about Jesus walking out of the tomb. The film is rumored to show moments from heaven and hell, the spiritual battle between good and evil, and scenes that go far beyond what's in the Bible. Some call it bold, others call it dangerous. Critics are already lining up. They say the timing feels off. The world is too divided. Faith is too personal. And Gibson is the wrong man to lead this story. They question whether this film is a true spiritual reflection or just a Hollywood fantasy dressed up in Bible verses.
Battle sequences and stuff with the logistical nightmare of explosions and extras and soldiers and stunts and everything else. And it's just, I don't know. You don't know how you're going to do it, you know?
Mel Gibson is out to shock the world again. And this time, none of us is prepared for it. His film The Passion of the Christ showed the final hours of Jesus in a way no one had ever seen before. It was bloody and raw. It made people cry, argue, and think. Now, after more than 2 decades, Mel is back with a sequel and the world is not sure what to expect. So many odds are stacked already. He's older, the audience is different, and the pressure is bigger than ever. Is this just another movie? Or is it Mel Gibson's final fight to keep his faith alive in a world that keeps telling him to sit down?
What I had to, it is such a massive undertaking that you can't do it lightly and you can't do it quickly. You have to really consider what it is that you need to show in order to be poignant. It can't be linear. You have to have many things to juxtapose against one another, even from different time periods, in order to illustrate what something means in a more full way. And I think it's going to be a real jigsaw puzzle to do. And I have 2 scripts.
Right.
And one of them is very structured and a very strong script.
In 2004, people walked out of theaters in silence. Some were crying, some were angry, but no one forgot what they saw. The Passion of the Christ wasn't just a film, it was an experience. It showed Jesus' final hours with brutal honesty. There was no soft music, no gentle scenes. It was violent, emotional, and deeply spiritual. And it made over $600 million at the box office, all while being told in Aramaic and Latin. That had never happened before. Mel Gibson didn't just tell a story. He made the audience feel the pain, the sacrifice, and the love of Jesus in a way that had never been done on screen. Some people said it was too much. Others said it was exactly what the world needed. But now, after 21 years, Mel wants to go even further. He's working on the sequel, and it's called Resurrection. This time, he's not just showing suffering. He wants to show the power and mystery of rising from the dead.
I denied you 3 times. How can I now look you in the eyes?
Preach all that I have commanded you. I am with you until the end of time. Death held me for a moment, but love set me free forever.
He is risen. Just as he said.
I saw him. They didn't believe me, but I know. It was him. His resurrection was the beginning.
It was a very difficult thing to find and synthesize because you have to understand, firstly, why it had to happen. And to understand something like that, you have to think, like, why is mankind so important in this process? Like, why are the big realms of good and evil slugging it out for the hearts, minds, and souls of mankind? Why us? I mean, we're just a bunch of, like, fucked up things. Skin puppets, right, you know?
Mel's spending nearly $40 million on visual effects alone. And it's not to make explosions or monsters. It's to make sure Jesus looks real. Because in this film, the audience isn't coming for CGI. They're coming for something spiritual and sacred. The question is, can Hollywood's tools serve heaven's message? Mel Gibson and Jim Caviezel are no strangers to controversy. Ever since The Passion of the Christ released in 2004, both have lived under a spotlight, one that doesn't always shine kindly. For Mel, the backlash started not just because of the film's intensity, but because of his personal actions. His past included angry outbursts, drinking issues, and public rants that led many to question if he could still be a voice for faith. He also faced storms. More recently, he's spoken in interviews that link him to political movements and conspiracy theories. Some of his words have raised eyebrows and created a new wave of headlines. The tension keeps growing. How do you show something as holy as resurrection on a movie screen? Do you keep it quiet and mysterious? Or do you make it epic and loud? And then there's the biggest pressure of all, getting the theology. Mel knows he's not just telling a story. He's trying to show something millions of people deeply believe in. If he misses the mark, the backlash won't just be from critics, it'll come from believers too. So, will this film lift hearts or tear his legacy in half? Mel Gibson has always believed in doing things the hard way if it makes the story better. But this time, he's got a new kind of challenge, and it's all digital. Jim Caviezel, the actor who played Jesus in The Passion of the Christ, is back. But he's now 55 years old. In the new film, he needs to look like he did 20 years ago, which is Mel and his team are using cutting-edge technology. They're scanning Jim's face in 3D. They're using artificial intelligence to map out every facial muscle. They're even using software called Chrono Sync to blend his current look with younger images. The goal is simple. Make it look real. No weird faces. No stiff movements. Nothing that pulls people out of the story. They want people to feel like they're seeing the real Jesus, not a digital copy. But the risk is high. If the effects don't work, even in just one scene, it could ruin everything. One strange shot, one creepy smile, and people won't be talking about the message. They'll be talking about how fake it looked. Now, both Jim and Mel are stepping back into the spotlight together. But the world they're walking into is even more divided than before. Some pastors and churches support them. They say Mel and Jim are imperfect men telling a perfect story. Others step back, unsure if these two still reflect the message they're trying to share. Back in 2004, The Passion of the Christ shocked people, not just because it was bloody or brutal, but because it felt real. You didn't just watch the crucifixion. You felt it. The pain, the weight, the sorrow. And that's what made it powerful, yet not without resistance. But now comes the hard part. Resurrection tells a different story. This one isn't about pain. It's about hope, mystery, and spiritual wonder. And that's harder to show on screen.
It's early days, you know. You got to figure out where to do it, how to do it, when to do it. You know, it's like there's no specific timeline on the thing, but it's definitely on my mind. And, you know, moving forward, it's a bit phlegmatic at the moment, but I think it'll pick up momentum as I get a clearer picture of what it is my task should be and will be.
I'm curious why you think this is a story that so many people feel compelled to kind of tell in their own way.
I think because it influenced history and nationhood and the world. So of course it should be looked at, and many people have different takes on what they think it was, or, you know, and then there's a more biblical take, and then there's somebody who, you know, off over there someplace, and I mean, you know, there's room for everybody to.
There's also talk that the film might include the harrowing of hell, a moment where Jesus descends into the underworld to free lost souls. It's a powerful Catholic tradition, but not all Christians believe in it. Some might feel left out. Others might feel confused. So now the challenge is bigger than just filming. It's about balance. Can Mel tell a story that captures the miracle of resurrection without making it feel like a fantasy? Can he honor different beliefs without watering down the message?
Was the place where the story began. Then what came next had to change the universe. Imagine it. A world wrapped in silence. A tomb sealed by fear, guarded by Rome, and ignored by those who once followed him. The skies, still heavy from the storm. The earth, quiet after the quake. And the body wrapped, lifeless, resting in the heart of stone. But beneath the surface, a war had already been won. And as dawn approached that third day, nothing would remain untouched. Let's not forget, this isn't just about resurrection. This is about the restoration of creation itself. Because when Christ stepped out of the grave, he wasn't just alive, he was triumphant. He had walked into death and returned with the keys to every prison. That's what this sequel is promising. Not just a retelling of the Gospels, but a revelation of the unseen. The moment when heaven collided with earth and tore the veil forever. And the first to witness that miracle, not kings, not soldiers, not scholars, but a woman, Mary Magdalene. A woman rejected by her culture. A woman once broken, now whole. A woman who followed Jesus when all others fled. It was she who stood near the cross. She who watched where they laid him, and she who came in the early morning with nothing but grief in her hands and hope in her heart. And what did she find? Not a corpse, not silence, but absence. The stone was moved. The guards, paralyzed with fear. The linen, folded with care. The tomb, empty. In that moment, confusion. In the next, a voice. Mary. One word, and the entire arc of history bent around it. She turned and saw the impossible. Not but her teacher, alive. Do not cling to me, he said, for I have not yet ascended to the Father. John 20:17. This moment, quiet, intimate, yet cosmic in scope, will be the heartbeat of the film. It's not the spectacle that transforms, it's the recognition, because when Mary saw the risen Christ, she didn't see just victory, she saw love, living, breathing, eternal. And it didn't stop there. Scripture tells us Jesus appeared not once, but many times after the resurrection, to two travelers on the road to Emmaus, who didn't recognize him until he broke bread, to the frightened disciples behind locked doors, to Thomas who doubted until he touched the wounds. These scenes, often skimmed over in retellings, will now take center stage. The resurrected Christ was not ethereal. He ate with them, spoke with them, walked with them, and through these moments, a new understanding was born. He had not returned just to comfort. He had returned to commission, and the world would never be the same. That's what Mel Gibson wants to explore. The ignition of the early church, the transformation of terrified fishermen into unbreakable apostles, the moment where men who ran now stood and gave everything, and yet, with that transformation came tension. Even among his followers, the resurrection wasn't instantly understood. Some couldn't believe it. Some feared it. Some resisted what it meant for their lives. The film will depict that too, the struggle between faith and fear, between the old self and the new life Christ offered. Because resurrection demands response. It's not something you watch. It's something that demands everything from you. The sequel aims to mirror that spiritual shockwave, to portray what it felt like to stand on the edge of divine reality, with no roadmap, only the memory of a broken body now alive again. That's why this story must go deeper, beyond tradition, beyond comfort. This is about those fragile post-resurrection days, days of confusion, awe, and overwhelming joy. And yes, days of betrayal and doubt. Not everyone embraced the miracle. Some feared its implications. Religious authorities, already furious over the crucifixion, now faced an even greater threat, an empty tomb and rumors spreading like wildfire. They doubled down, bribed the guards, silenced the whispers, tried to crush what was already unstoppable. But truth doesn't die, and resurrection cannot be buried. Soon, the apostles began to move, not with swords, but with words. Their message wasn't political revolution. It was transformation. He is risen. He appeared to us. We saw him. We touched him. We are witnesses. That word, witness, became everything. In Greek, it's marties, the same root as martyr, because to witness resurrection was to die for it. The movie will not shy away from this. It will not romanticize the aftermath. It will show the cost, the sacrifice, the persecutions, the imprisonments, the executions. Because resurrection did not lead to comfort, it led to calling. And that calling was paid for in blood. Peter crucified in Rome. Paul beheaded after years in chains. Stephen stoned as Saul watched. And yet they sang, they rejoiced, not because they were fearless, but because they had seen something greater than death. They had seen him, alive. An original epic narrative film script continued. But what happens when the world refuses to believe? When truth is too radiant for eyes that have grown used to darkness? Because while the apostles carried a message of life, the world around them was preparing for war. The Sanhedrin, still reeling from the crucifixion, now faced a far greater dilemma. The tomb was empty, undeniably empty, and rumors were growing louder than swords. Guards who had seen the angel descend, who had fallen like dead men from fear, were paid to lie. Tell them his disciples stole the body while you slept. Matthew 28:13. A narrative forged not from evidence, but from fear. The leaders of Israel had crushed the prophet, yet his name would not be silenced, not even by death, especially not by death. And so began the persecution. But the fire only spread. The apostles, now emboldened by the Holy Spirit, began to move publicly. They preached in the streets, healed the sick, confronted the very men who had condemned their master, and one by one they paid the price. But before the blood, there was wind. Before the chains, there was flame. Pentecost, that mysterious, electrifying day, 50 days after Passover, when heaven refused to stay silent. The sequel, as Gibson envisions it, will erupt into this moment with visual and emotional force. A locked upper room, fearful hearts, prayers whispered into silence, and then, suddenly, a sound, like a rushing wind. Tongues of fire descend. Voices rise in languages never learned. Men who once fled now roar like lions. Peter, the fisherman who denied Christ 3 times, now steps into the square and proclaims, "This Jesus, whom you crucified, God has raised him up. God has raised him up." Acts 2:32. 3,000 believe. The church is born, not in power, but in spirit. And as this newly ignited movement begins to spread, the story continues to unfold across cities, continents, and souls. The resurrection is not confined to one morning. It ripples through history. But the cost is high, because the apostles weren't merely preaching a message, they were defying an empire. Rome was not built on grace, it was built on dumb. And any claim that someone, anyone, had defeated death, that shook the very foundations of Caesar's authority. This wasn't just religion. This was revolution of a higher kind. A kingdom not of this world, but destined to change it. And that's exactly what the sequel aims to show. Not just what happened, but what it meant, and what it still means. Because as the apostles spread the message, Jerusalem, Samaria, Antioch, Rome, they faced not only prisons and whips, but temptation, exhaustion, doubt. Some, like Thomas, had already battled disbelief, but now they would face something more insidious, fatigue, and fear that the promise might not hold. It's here that the story plunges into the raw humanity of the early church. Yes, there were miracles. Yes, there were signs. But there were also betrayals, arguments, stumbles. Even Peter, the rock, would struggle with compromise in Antioch. Paul would rebuke him. And yet they pressed on, because they had seen the resurrected one, and he had promised, "I am with you always, even to the end of the age." Matthew 28:28. Gibson's film is not just about glorious visions. It's about grit, about men and women holding on to faith when all around them crumbled. Think of Stephen, the first martyr, a deacon, a servant, accused by false witnesses, dragged before the council, and sentenced to death. But as the stones were lifted, he looked up. And what did he see? "I see the heavens opened, and the Son of Man standing at the right hand of God." Acts 7:56. And they stoned him. But in death he echoed his master, "Lord, do not hold this sin against them." In that moment, death lost another battle. This is what Gibson wants the world to remember. That the resurrection was not a moment. It was a movement, fueled not by politics or armies, but by love that could not be killed. And here, in this act of holy defiance, another figure appears. One who would soon change everything. A man holding the coats, watching Stephen die, unmoved, unflinching, named Saul. Soon, very soon, that name will fall, and another will rise. But that's not yet, because even as the church expanded, as signs and wonders followed the apostles, as the gospel spread like wildfire, darkness also grew, and the apostles would one by one be hunted down. But none would run. Why? Because of what they saw. Because of who they saw. Because once you've looked into the eyes of the resurrected Christ, nothing else compares. Not pain, not chains, not death. And this is where the next chapter begins, with a persecutor on the road, a light from heaven, and a voice that shatters everything he thought he knew. It begins on a road. Dust kicks up with each step. The sun bears down on a man whose eyes burn with fury. His name is Saul, and in his mind he carries a mission: to crush the movement, to erase every trace of the resurrection, to silence the name of Jesus once and for all. He believes he's doing the will of God, that this uprising of Nazarenes is blasphemy, that those who speak of an empty tomb deserve judgment. He has permission. He has authority. He has the power of men. But what he doesn't know is that heaven is about to interrupt him. And then a light, not sunlight, not fire, something otherworldly. It surrounds him, blinds him, knocks him to the ground, and a voice speaks, not in rage but in power. Saul, why you persecute me? Acts 9:4, shaking eyes wide with terror, he replies, Who are you, Lord? And the voice answers, I am Jesus, whom you are persecuting. Now, get up, go into the city. You will be told what to do. Acts 9:5-6. Just like that, the persecutor becomes the pursued. The hunter becomes the one who must be led, and he rises blind. This moment changes everything, because up until now, the story has belonged to those who followed Christ in life. But now, God chooses one who opposed him. Violently, passionately, relentlessly, to become the loudest voice of all. This is no coincidence. It is a declaration that resurrection isn't just a story for the faithful. It's an invitation to the enemies. No one is too far gone. No one is beyond redemption. The film will follow Saul into the silence of blindness, into 3 days of darkness. Sound familiar? Just as Christ lay 3 days in the tomb, now Saul lies 3 days in confusion, unseeing, unknowing, and waiting. And then a whisper from God to a man named Ananias. Go to him, lay hands on him. He is my chosen vessel. Ananias recoils. This man has done great harm to your people. But the voice is clear. I have chosen him. He will suffer for my name. Ananias obeys. He walks into the house, sees the man once feared like a sword, and with trembling hands he touches him. Brother Saul, he says, the Lord Jesus has sent me. Acts 9:17. And just like that, scales fall from Saul's eyes. He blinks, he breathes, he sees, not just with his eyes, but with his soul. That moment becomes the birth of Paul. Not just a new name, but a new life, a new fire. Because the man who once dragged Christians in chains will now break the chains of nations with the gospel. He will be shipwrecked, stoned, imprisoned, beaten, and eventually executed. But never again will he deny the truth. He saw the risen Lord. And for the rest of his life, he will shout it through blood, through tears, through letters that will one day become scripture. That Jesus Christ died, that he was buried, and that he rose on the 3rd day, just as he said. Now the film turns. It expands. No longer just Jerusalem, no longer just Galilee. Now we see Antioch, Corinth, Ephesus, Philippi, Rome. We see tents and temples, deserts and cities, council chambers and prison cells. We see the gospel colliding with cultures, kings trembling before prisoners, philosophers silenced by fishermen, demons cast out by the mere name of Jesus. And everywhere, the same reaction. Some believe, some mock, some plot to kill, but the message cannot be stopped. It is not a religion, it is not a rebellion, it is resurrection, the moment when death lost its grip on the world. And what makes it unstoppable is that it doesn't rely on buildings or borders. It spreads heart to heart, soul to soul, witness to witness. The sequel will now show Paul writing letters by candlelight, bleeding from lashes, imprisoned yet joyful, dictating truths that will one day guide millions. He will write of grace, of mercy, of justification by faith, of the mystery of the cross, of the hope that cannot die. And always, always, he will point back to the empty tomb, even as his own grave approaches. And here, as Paul's journey begins to close, the film will bring us back to the apostles, each of them now scattered, each of them walking a path paved in sacrifice. Peter, soon to be crucified upside down in Rome. Andrew, preaching to the end on a saltire cross. James, the first to fall, beheaded by Herod. Thomas, stabbed in India after baptizing thousands. Bartholomew, tortured, flayed, then martyred. Philip, hung upside down. Matthew, slain in Ethiopia. Simon the Zealot, sawed in half. Thaddeus, beaten to death. And John, boiled alive, only to survive, exiled to Pat. And still, not one of them recanted. Why? Because they saw him. Because death could not convince them to deny what they touched with their own hands. And now, with Rome closing in, the final chapter begins to take shape. The apostles' voices grow fainter in the world, but louder in eternity. They do not fade. They rise, because their blood is seed, and the world they leave behind, though darkened by persecution, will one day echo with their witness. The tomb is still empty. Christ is still risen, and the story is not over. But if the apostles were gone, if their voices were silenced, if their blood had soaked the earth like seeds in a barren field, what then? What remains after the martyrs fall? What comes after the last disciple exhales his final breath? This is where the sequel reaches its most daring chapter. Because resurrection doesn't end with an empty tomb, and it doesn't end with 12 men who turned the world upside down. Resurrection continues through those who never saw him, but still believed. And at the heart of that next generation stood one final witness, an old man, exiled, alone, but burning with a fire that had not dimmed with age. His name was John, the beloved disciple, the only apostle to escape martyrdom, though not without pain. Tradition tells us he was plunged into boiling oil in Rome, and survived. Rome, unable to kill him, banished him to a barren island, Patmos. There, in isolation, the last living voice of the first generation waited, not for death, but for revelation. He had walked with Christ. He had leaned on his chest at the Last Supper. He had run to the tomb. And now, surrounded by nothing but rock and sea, he closes his eyes, and heaven opens. What unfolds next will become the final sequence of the film. It is no longer biography. It is vision. It is prophecy. Because on the island of Patmos, John is shown what no eye has seen. He hears a voice like a trumpet. He turns and sees one like the Son of Man, standing among 7 golden lampstands, eyes blazing like fire, a sword coming from his mouth, his face shining like the sun. Revelation 1:12-16. It is Jesus, not as the suffering servant, not as the broken man on the cross, but as the King of Kings, glorified, eternal, unstoppable. Do not be afraid, he says. I am the first and the last. I was dead, and now look, I am alive forever and ever, and I hold the keys of death and Hades. Revelation 1:17-18. This moment ties the entire arc of the resurrection together. He holds the keys, the very keys he claimed 3 days in the grave, the very keys he used to unlock the gates of Sheol, the very keys that shattered the dominion of death. Now they hang from his belt, forever. And John, trembling, receives visions of what is to come, the letters to the churches, the Lamb who was slain, the scroll with 7 seals, the dragon cast down, the martyrs crying out for justice, the final judgment, and the new heaven and new earth. But in the heart of it all, a throne, and on it the Lamb, worthy because he was slain, worthy because he lives, worthy because he conquered. This is not just John's vision. It's our inheritance, because resurrection doesn't belong to history. it belongs to eternity. And what began with an angel rolling away, a stone ends with all creation declaring in one voice, "Worthy is the Lamb who was slain, to receive power and wealth and wisdom and strength and honor and glory and praise." Revelation 5:12. The film will now intercut John's revelation with flashes of every sacrifice. Peter nailed to a cross, Paul writing from his cell, Stephen's blood staining the stones, Saul falling to the ground, Mary Magdalene weeping with joy, Thomas touching the wounds, the fire at Pentecost, the veil torn, the angel at the tomb, the earthquake, the cross, the silence, and finally the empty tomb. It all leads here, to this throne, to this forever. And as the final sequence unfolds, one truth becomes undeniable. This was never just a story. It was never just history. It is prophecy. It is prophecy. It is promise. Resurrection didn't just happen. It is happening now, here, in every heart that dares to believe. Because the film does not end with death. It ends with life, real life, eternal life, resurrected life. And when the credits begin to roll, and the theater goes dark, and the echoes of this story linger in the chest of every soul watching, one question will remain: what will you do with the resurrection? Because it's no longer just his story. It could be yours too. And so, it ends, not in silence, not in darkness, but in light so blinding, so consuming, that no shadow can survive it. The story of Christ didn't stop at the cross. It didn't finish with the tomb. It exploded into history and has been unraveling through hearts and centuries ever since. This film, The Passion of the Christ, the Resurrection, is not just a sequel. It is a reckoning, an echo across time. An echo across time, a cinematic resurrection of memory, prophecy, and hope. But here's what makes it different. It dares to ask the question no one else is asking anymore. What if it was all real? What if the veil truly tore in two? What if death really did die that morning? What if that Galilean carpenter truly stepped into hell and walked out with every key? And what if he's not just alive, but still moving, still breaking chains, still confronting persecutors on dusty roads, still standing beside the betrayed, still whispering names in gardens of grief, still walking into locked rooms where fear has kept us captive, still saying, "Peace be with you." Because that's what resurrection is. Not a moment, a movement, not a doctrine, a doorway, and it remains open right now. As you read these words, you're not just hearing a script. You're standing at the edge of the greatest story ever told. And the only question left is, will you step in? Because everything you've seen, the passion, the betrayal, the cross, the grave, the descent into hell, the fire of Pentecost, the courage of the martyrs, the exile of John, the vision of the Lamb, it wasn't meant to stay trapped in ancient scrolls or dusty cinema reels. It was meant to burn into your soul. It was meant to change the way you see everything. This film ends not with credits, but with a calling. And maybe that's what Mel Gibson always intended. Not to entertain, not to provoke, but to awaken. Because the resurrection is not finished. It's unfolding. In the fire of conviction, in the trembling of prayers whispered by the broken, in every quiet act of defiance against evil, in every soul who chooses to forgive rather than hate, to love rather than fear, to rise rather than fear, remain buried. The Passion of the Christ, too, is not about returning to the past. It's about reclaiming the future. It's about reminding a world addicted to noise and numbness that something eternal once stepped into history and split time in half, and the empty tomb still stands, undeniable, unconquered, undefiled. What began with one man hanging on a cross ends with a kingdom that cannot be shaken. And as the final images of the film fade, the apostles gone, the church is rising, the world turning, we are left with one final frame. Not a throne, not a lamb, not a crown, but a pair of footprints in the dust, facing outward, as if to say, now it's your turn. Because resurrection is not just about what Jesus did. It's about what you do with what he did. Will you keep walking? Will you carry the light? Will you testify with your life, as they did with theirs? If the cross was the price, and the tomb was the battle, then the resurrection is the invitation to rise, to begin again, to live, truly live, without fear of the grave. Because he lives, you can too. And that's not just cinema. That's eternity. If this story has touched you, if it's awakened something long buried, then don't let it fade when the screen goes dark. Let it burn. Let it rise. Let it resurrect you. Share this story. Speak this name. And never, never let the world forget he is risen, not once, forever. What if everything you just witnessed is more than a film? What if the greatest story ever told was never meant to be told just once? What if the resurrection was not a conclusion, but a summons? This is the moment where story meets soul. Because now, the screen fades. The characters step away, but the message remains, burning, alive, undeniable. You've journeyed through the betrayal, the blood, the silence, the tomb. You've walked into the darkness with Christ, and you've watched him walk out, radiant, victorious, unbroken. But now comes the true question, what will you do with it? Because the resurrection of Jesus Christ is not just something that happened. It is something that is still happening, right now, in you, in us, in the aching, crumbling, seeking places where hope is hard to find. There are still tombs being rolled away, still hearts being resurrected, still Saul to Paul transformations happening in the most unexpected people, still Marys who meet him in the garden, and still Johns receiving visions on their own islands of exile. And maybe, just maybe, you're next. Before you go, consider this. Have you ever wondered what Jesus did in those 3 days in the realm of the dead? Have you ever imagined a look in Satan's eyes when Christ walked into his domain? What did the fallen angels see when they beheld the Lamb victorious? And here's a question history may have never answered. What if the resurrection is only the beginning of the last great story of humanity? Prophecies still unfold. Some say there will be a final persecution, when again the faithful must stand without fear. Some believe we are on the edge of another great shaking, a time when the Lamb and the Lion will walk again through fire, when the veil between heaven and earth will split one last time. And maybe this film is only a shadow of what's still to come. So tell us, do you believe the resurrection is real? What scene moved you the most? What question burns deepest in your heart? Was it the empty tomb, the descent into Sheol, the martyrs refusing to deny what they had seen, or the moment John turned and saw the risen Christ standing, waiting, calling? Leave your thoughts in the comments. Share your favorite moment. Share what pierced your soul. Because this is no ordinary story, and you are no ordinary audience. This channel was created not just to inform, but to awake. And if you made it to this point, you're not here by accident. So if you want more stories like this, if you want to uncover the hidden truths of Scripture, if you want to see the Bible as it was always meant to be seen, alive, dramatic, cinematic, transcendent, then subscribe to our channel right now. Join the movement and turn on the notifications so you never miss what comes next. Because next time, we're going even deeper There are still untold stories, still hidden scrolls, still miracles buried in time, still revelations that will shake your soul. So don't walk away from the resurrection. Walk into it, live in it, because he is not there. He is risen. And the story continues. Thank you for watching. Peace to your heart, strength to your faith, and light to your path. Until next time, keep your eyes open and your spirit ready, because you never know when the next resurrection might begin.
There are moments in history that are too vast for words, too sacred for scripts, and too eternal for human understanding. And yet, there are those bold enough to try. This is not just another film, not just another sequel. This is the most daring cinematic undertaking of our time. Mel Gibson is back, and he's not here to repeat the past. He's here to resurrect it. When The Passion of the Christ premiered in 2004, it did more than break records. It pierced the conscience of the world. It stunned Hollywood. It ignited debates. And for millions, it cracked open the gates of faith. Over $600 million in box office revenue. Languages spoken: Aramaic, Hebrew, Latin. Blood spilled? Too much to count. But what came next? For years, the world whispered, will there be a part 2? Will we see what happens after the tomb? And now, after nearly 20 years of silence, Mel Gibson speaks. Not with a teaser, not with a trailer, but with a fire in his voice and a message burning in his hands. He said it plainly. It took me 8 years to write it. 8 years, not of production, not of editing, but of soul-searching. 8 years of praying, researching ancient texts, wrestling with theology, fighting internal doubt, and confronting the unfathomable. How do you portray the resurrection of God himself? It wasn't enough to write a film. He had to craft an experience. And what emerged from that spiritual crucible wasn't one film. It was 2. Because how do you contain eternity in 2 hours? You don't. You expand it. You split it. You dive deeper. Mel Gibson confirmed. This story is too enormous. It had to become 2 parts. But this isn't just about chronology. It's about magnitude. The resurrection isn't an epilogue. It's the epicenter of all human hope. And this time, the story reaches beyond the tomb. The film begins in the shadows, in the deepest, most silent hour of history, the hour after death. When the body of Christ lies still, the skies have darkened, and all seems lost. But in that silence, something begins to tremble, because beneath the surface of the earth, a war has already begun. According to Gibson, the film does not simply show a man rising. It shows the heavens convulsing, the angels holding their breath, the fallen trembling, the veil between life and death thinning until it tears completely. The script, kept secret for years, was finally read aloud to a group of executives. Not one was left unmoved. Many were left in tears. These were not sentimental tears. They were spiritual tears, because the script didn't just entertain. It revealed. It revealed the cost of salvation, the battle raging in unseen realms, the reason Christ had to die, and the unstoppable glory of his rising. This is not a sequel. This is a reckoning. Mel Gibson's vision is not limited to Jerusalem or Golgotha. This time, we will see the spiritual battlefield, the realms beyond time, the consequence of sin, the collapse of darkness, and at the center of it all, a risen Christ whose power cracks open the bones of death and shatters the dominion of hell. The cast remains, with Jim Caviezel returning as Jesus, but even Caviezel himself has said, "This film is going to be the biggest one ever, bigger than the first, because what we're showing, no one's ever dared shown before. We will see fallen angels. We will see the great divide. We will see the war between realms. We will see the keys of death and Hades being taken." Mel Gibson has never been shy about pushing boundaries, but here he doesn't push for shock. He pushes for truth. In an age that edits out the supernatural, this film throws us into it. In a world allergic to the divine, this film declares it loud. And he's not alone. Lionsgate has officially joined the mission. After reading the script, their response wasn't just business. It was conviction. Executives wept, not because of profits, but because they saw what this story could do to hearts. But what's truly extraordinary is not the scope of the film. It's the fact that Mel Gibson himself is terrified to make it. He said, "I'm scared to death." Why? Because when you dare touch something this holy, you feel the weight of eternity pressing on your chest. "If you're not scared," Mel Gibson said, "you're probably doing it wrong." And maybe he's right. Because if Christ's resurrection doesn't leave us trembling, then maybe we've never understood it. This film, these two films, are not entertainment. They are encounters. Encounters with eternity, with light and darkness, with death and resurrection. They will not answer every question. They will not simplify the mysteries, but they will pull us into the depths of the greatest moment in history. And that's why this project is different. This is not about religion. This is not about box office. This is not about culture. This is about a man who walked out of a grave and changed everything. A man whose heartbeat rewrote the laws of nature, whose voice pierced the underworld, whose scars still shine with glory. This film will ask you, what if it's all true? What if death really lost? What if he really is alive? And if that's the case, then you and I have a decision to make. Because the resurrection isn't just a moment. It's a revolution. And revolutions demand a response. The camera will roll. The tomb will open. The story will explode. But before it hits the screen, before you watch a single frame, ask yourself, am I ready to meet the risen one? It begins where most stories end. In darkness. In silence. In the stillness of a sealed tomb. a stone unmoved, a body lifeless, a world shattered. But what the world thought was over, what Rome thought it had buried, what hell thought it had claimed, was only the beginning. Because something eternal was stirring in the depths, something that would not remain silent, something that would defy time, death, and reason itself. The resurrection was not a return, it was a conquest, a divine uprising, a rupture in the laws of mortality. And Mel Gibson wants the world to feel every tremor of it, not just to watch the stone roll away, but to feel the earth shake beneath their feet. In interviews, Gibson revealed something shocking. This film wouldn't just portray the return of Jesus from death. It would attempt something far more dangerous. It would explore the invisible war. The film dives into what happened between the death of Christ and his resurrection. Where did his spirit go? What did he confront in the realm of the dead? What did he take back? This is where the second part of the film series earns its name. Not just resurrection, but domination. Because the cross was the price, but the resurrection was the victory. In the script, Jesus doesn't just walk out of the tomb, he descends into the very heart of darkness. He enters Sheol, the place of the dead, the pit feared by kings, the abyss whispered in nightmares. And what does he find? Legions, chains, souls in torment, the ancient enemies of heaven staring into the eyes of the one they tried to silence. But here's the twist that turns the entire narrative on its head. Jesus walks in, not as a victim, but as a conqueror. No longer beaten, no longer bleeding, but radiant with unstoppable glory. The scars still remain, but now they shine like weapons of light. In Gibson's vision, this isn't mythology, this is warfare. The descent is not defeat, it is invasion. He's not escaping death, he's breaking into it, and he has come to tear the gates off their hinges. In the film's most dramatic arc, Jesus reaches the prisoners of old, the righteous souls waiting in hope. Abraham, Moses, David, the prophets. For centuries they waited. Now their deliverer has come. And when he speaks, death loses its grip. Chains fall, the prison trembles, the doors open, and the captives rise. This is the moment the heavens roar. The moment the veil between worlds is torn. The moment every demonic dominion sees their end written in fire. This isn't poetic exaggeration. This is scripture unleashed. The book of Revelation, the prophecies of Isaiah, the visions of Ezekiel, they weren't written to decorate pages. They were warnings. And now Gibson brings them to life in terrifying beauty. From this infernal realm, Jesus returns, but not empty-handed. He rises with the keys of death and Hades in his grasp. What does that mean? It means he didn't just survive death, he conquered it. He now holds authority over the realm that once held every man and woman hostage. And as he steps into the light of dawn, back into the land of the living, the entire spiritual universe is changed. forever. And yet, Gibson does not stop there. Because resurrection is not just about power, it's about purpose. Jesus returns not simply to prove who he is, but to gather those he loves, to reignite the mission, to restore the broken, to confront the traitors, to breathe again into the lungs of the church. One of the most anticipated scenes in the script involves the moment Mary Magdalene encounters the risen Christ. The garden, the confusion, the weeping. She thinks he's the gardener, until he calls her by name, Mary. That single word, spoken with resurrected breath, breaks every barrier. This is not just cinematic, this is sacred. And from there, the story ignites. The disbelief of Thomas, the meal on the beach with Peter, the road to Emmaus, the trembling of the Sanhedrin, the fury of Rome. Each thread weaves together to show what resurrection truly demands. Response. No one who meets the risen Christ stays the same. You either fall on your knees or you run, but you never walk away indifferent. What makes this film dangerous is not its visuals, not its budget, not even its controversial theology. What makes it dangerous is its truth. Because if it's true, if Jesus actually defeated death, actually rose from the grave, actually holds the authority of eternity, then every soul on earth must decide, will I follow him or crucify him again with my silence? That's why this isn't just a film for Christians. It's a film for doubters, for skeptics, for those who walked away from faith long ago, for those who've reduced Jesus to a metaphor. Because this film doesn't whisper, it shouts. And its message is simple. He's alive. Not in theory, not in memory, but in power. Mel Gibson has made films that shook the world, but this time, he's aiming at something deeper. He's not after awards, he's not after applause, he's after souls. He wants to tell the story in such a way that no viewer walks away the same. And maybe, just maybe, that's what we need right now. In a culture drowning in distractions, in a world addicted to death, in an age allergic to truth, what if the only cure is to stare directly into the empty tomb? The resurrection is not safe. It's a reckoning. And Mel Gibson about to put that reckoning on the biggest screen possible. No release date yet, but something tells us this is not just a movie release. This is a spiritual event. And it will come, whether we're ready or not. So when the lights go down and the story begins, ask yourself one final question. What will I do with the risen Christ? Because he came once, he rose once, and he's coming again. This time, not as a lamb, but as a lion. It began with an empty tomb, But the echo of that miracle kept expanding, rippling outward like a stone dropped into eternity. While the world tried to make sense of what could not be explained, heaven was already setting its course, and the disciples, they were being prepared, not to grieve, but to ignite the greatest spiritual revolution in human history. What they had seen, what they had touched, what they now believed could no longer be contained. The man they followed had conquered death, but what they were about to realize was that they too were called to rise. The days after the resurrection were unlike any in human history. Jesus did not return in secret. He appeared again and again to men and women from every corner of society, to those who had believed, to those who had doubted, to those who had abandoned him. On the road to Emmaus, two travelers walked in confusion, their hearts heavy with sorrow. A stranger joined them. He spoke not of mourning, but of prophecy. He revealed the scriptures, explained the Messiah's suffering, and how it had all been written long before nails and thorns. Only when he broke bread before them did their eyes open, and in that moment he vanished. The resurrection shattered the grave, but its echo didn't end in Jerusalem. It traveled across deserts, cities, continents. It reached people who had never heard the name Jesus until they met someone willing to die for him. What began as a trembling group of disciples soon became an unstoppable force, not by weapons, not by armies, but by truth and the kind of courage that the world couldn't understand. You see, no empire expected this. Rome had seen revolts. It had seen gods rise and fall, but it had never encountered a faith that grew stronger under fire. The disciples had witnessed the risen Christ, but they weren't called to remain in comfort. Each one was sent, not to build monuments, but to carry the message. And so they went. Peter traveled to Antioch, to Corinth, to Rome. Paul crossed seas, faced shipwrecks, imprisonment, beatings. Thomas walked east toward India. John remained a witness for decades, even as persecution reached his doorstep. They didn't go because it was safe. They went because they knew. What waited beyond death was greater than anything on earth. They had seen eternity, and eternity had a name. But let's step back for a moment, because what makes this story so extraordinary is not only what was seen, but what was unseen. While men moved across nations, heaven moved in parallel. Angels were dispatched. Demons resisted. Spiritual battles unfolded over the hearts of cities. Wherever the gospel was preached, a reaction occurred, not just politically or socially, but spiritually. Souls awakened. Idols crumbled. Oppression stirred, and darkness fought back with everything it had. In Ephesus, the temples shook. The name of Jesus threatened centuries of pagan tradition. Soothsayers, sorcerers, merchants, they lost power, money, control. A riot broke out. Crowds chanted, "Great is Artemis of the Ephesians." But Paul stood firm. He knew this wasn't just a battle of beliefs. It was a confrontation of kingdoms, one built on lies, the other on truth. And truth doesn't back down. Elsewhere, new believers were tested. Some lost homes, others lost family, many lost their lives, but none turned back. Why? Because they had not inherited a philosophy. They had encountered a person, and that person had walked out of his grave. The more they were oppressed, the more they grew. The blood of the martyrs became seed, and wherever it fell, the church rose stronger. It wasn't perfect. It had divisions, struggles, setbacks, but it was alive. And no matter how hard Rome tried, it couldn't bury something God had raised. But not all battles came from outside. Inside the church, something began to stir. Doctrines had to be defended. False teachers emerged. Some tried to twist the message, make it more palatable, more political, more human. But the apostles fought to preserve it. Letters were written, churches were warned, truth had to remain pure. Because they knew compromise is more dangerous than persecution. And a real enemy doesn't always wear armor. Sometimes it wears a smile. As decades passed, one by one, the apostles died. Peter was crucified upside down. Paul was beheaded. James was thrown from the temple. Thomas was pierced in the east. Bartholomew flayed alive. Andrew crucified on an X-shaped cross. They didn't die for power. They didn't die for influence. They died for truth. And their deaths weren't the end of their testimony. They were the climax. Each drop of blood screamed louder than Anne's sermon. He lives. But one remained. John, the beloved disciple. He had seen it all. He had walked with Christ. He had seen the empty tomb, touched his scars. He had stood at the foot of the cross. And now, exiled to the island of Patmos, John received something no one else had. A vision. Not of the past, but of the end. Not of suffering, but glory. He saw the heavens opened. He saw the Lamb seated on the throne. He saw angels, trumpets, seals, and scrolls. He saw judgment and restoration. He saw the return of the King. But he also saw the war. A final war. One that would rage not only in the heavens, but on the earth. And with trembling hands, he wrote what we now call Revelation. The resurrection was never meant to be a conclusion. It was a gateway. What began in the stillness of an empty tomb erupted into centuries of movement. A movement not driven by swords or banners, but by a message that could not be silenced. And the heart of that message, that death was defeated, that sin had been paid for, that the veil between heaven and earth had been torn forever. But that victory, it came at a cost. And the battle didn't end with the apostles. It merely changed its form. What followed was a war unlike any the world had ever seen. A war fought in secret chambers, in Roman prisons, in catacombs, on crosses, in deserts. A war for truth.
a war for souls. The church was born in fire, not in comfort, not in luxury, but in suffering. In its earliest years, believers gathered in hiding. In caves, in homes, in underground passages, they whispered hymns under threat of death. They broke bread, knowing it might be their last meal. But still they gathered, because they knew the one they followed had risen. And once you encounter a resurrected king, there's no going back. Rome tried everything: decrees, torture, exile, spectacles in the arena. And yet with every execution, the church grew. The Emperor Nero burned them as torches to light his gardens. He fed them to beasts for the entertainment of crowds. But the more blood was spilled, the deeper the roots grew. Something eternal was taking hold, and not even the empire of Caesar could stop it. In time, the persecution would evolve.
The resurrection of Jesus Christ was not just a miracle of history. It was the collision of two worlds, heaven and earth, light and darkness, truth and deception. It marked the moment when eternity broke into time and death lost its grip forever. But resurrection is never passive. It demands a response. Because when a man who was publicly tortured, crucified, buried, and sealed behind a stone walks out of his grave, you can't just go back to life as usual. You're faced with a choice: to deny, to doubt, or to follow. And for those who followed, everything changed. This film, Resurrection, is not just about what happened 2,000 years ago. It's about what's still happening today. Because the same power that raised Christ from the dead didn't fade with time. It is alive, now, here. And it is still turning graves into gateways, still turning cowards into messengers, still transforming stories of despair into declarations of purpose. The resurrection wasn't just the end of Jesus' story. It was the beginning of everyone's else. In the days following his return from death, Jesus appeared not only to the 12, but to more than 500 witnesses. Fishermen, tax collectors, skeptics, women, elders, outsiders. He didn't appear in thrones or palaces. He appeared on dusty roads, by campfires, on shorelines. Why? Because the kingdom he was building was never about empire. It was about hearts. He knew the future church wouldn't be built by elites. It would be carried by those the world had overlooked. He looked into their eyes and gave them the impossible. Go, make disciples of all nations. No wealth, no armies, no political power, just a message and the Spirit of God. And so they went. They went to cities that mocked them, to synagogues that tried to stone them, to temples built to pagan gods. They went to the sick, to the poor, to the broken. They went with trembling voices and uncertain steps. There are stories that touch us, and then there are stories that shake the very foundation of the soul. This is one of them. Not because it's just historical, not because it's religious, but because it dares to confront the question that has haunted humanity for millennia. What happens when death is no longer the end? This is not just a sequel. This is not just a continuation. This is the resurrection. The story after the story. And what happens when the silence of a sealed tomb is broken by something eternal? It begins where the world believes everything has ended. A hill soaked in blood, a broken body taken down from a cross, a stone rolled into place, and the weight of sorrow too heavy to bear. For the followers of the Nazarene, everything they believed had been shattered. The miracles, the sermons, the promises now seemed like distant memories fading into despair. They buried their hope along with his body. But heaven had just begun to move. The third day was not just another sunrise. It was a reckoning. The women came at dawn, mourning, still broken. They carried spices, cloths, prayers, but what they found was not silence. It was a disruption of reality. The tomb was open, the guards gone, and inside, nothing. No body, no trace, just linen folded, and an atmosphere heavy with something sacred, something terrifying. Then came the voice. Why do you seek the living among the dead? Those words did not echo from the earth. They came from a realm beyond it. Words that carried the weight of heaven and a truth that would reshape everything. He is not here. He has risen. The impossible had just become real. The laws of nature overturned. The finality of death shattered. But what did it mean? Because this resurrection was not just an act. It was a war cry. It was the moment when the veil between worlds was torn. Not symbolically, literally. The physical and the spiritual collided. And in that collision, hell trembled. You see, while his disciples scattered in fear, while Jerusalem whispered in confusion, something deeper was taking place.